As you can see here, Paxton is back up on the stands, and a couple months ago when I was working on the clutch situation, I really thought I had fixed the problem with the transaxle down here, but apparently I had not. So I ordered a Synchronous gear, and we're going to remove the transmission here, and we're gonna have to replace that gear somehow. I've never done any transmission work before, and before the last time I'd never even touched a transmission, to be completely honest with you. So this is going to be an interesting project. Can you see that right there? I've got to remove that bolt, and then there is another one through this hole here, and then I have to take off the CV joints on both sides. Then I can remove the mounting hardware for the transaxle, and we can get it down. Now it's a little bit more complicated than that. We'll have to remove the shift linkage, and the shifter arm will have to come completely out to be able to get the transaxle out of the car. But now that I have this much clearance, I should be able to do this a lot easier. So I gotta get on removing those two bolts I just showed you and the shifting linkage up at the top. Then we can drop the transmission and break it apart to get to those gears. Okay, as you see there, the transaxle is completely out, and it is currently draining of all that gear oil. I'm gonna get that nasty, stinky stuff out so I don't get it all over me. Okay, here's the transmission now broke in half. As you can see, here are all the gears. You know, everything visually looks fine. I gotta go watch some videos, figure out which one is the first gear, and start carefully bringing these gears up and so we can get to that first gear. Okay, so I brought the gearbox, transmission, whatever you want to call it, to my work area, as you can see. Now, first thing I did, there's this little cap that's on the end. I took a flathead screwdriver and punched a hole through it. This has to be replaced. So you punch a hole through it, and then you're able to pry that cap out. And then there's a bolt right there, and you can use an impact. The bolt sits right in that cavity right there, and you get that bolt out. Now that's the first bit of steps. Let me get them to the next steps, and then I'll show you what to do next. Got that cover off and some other bolts and stuff. Make sure you get all those bolts off, because I was trying to pry that cover off and there were still two bolts left. I'm a dummy, okay? But as you can see here, here's the inside. I was able to get the bolt off over here on this shaft, but over on this shaft, as you can see here, there's this part that needs to be pulled off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this bolt right here, I'm gonna screw that back in, and then I'm gonna have to get a bearing puller, and hopefully I can get the teeth around back here and pull that bearing off. So that's the next step. I gotta go get one of those from O'Reilly or something like that, and we'll continue on after that. Okay, it's the next day in real life, and I got this, came in from Amazon today, and I'm gonna see if it can pull that bearing off. Never used one of these before, so we'll see what happens. Got it. This right here is the 5th gear synchro ring, and then this is the rest of that gear here. All of that is now pulled off, so we can access the rest of this area to pull out this side of the gearing, so we can finally get to this side of the gearing, which has the first gear in it. Oh, and by the way, I would not suggest these cheap Amazon Chinese-made pullers. I had to make a ton of modifications to make it thin enough to fit between the two gears. Just buy something higher quality. I just needed it quickly, and it did get the job done, with some modifications. So I gotta knock that little pin out right there so I can get this shift arm to move out of the way. And then we should be able to pull this piece out, which should allow the front of the bar to come out. We'll also have to remove these shifting arms up here. This is the first time I've ever done this. I'm trying my best to show it on camera, but I have to explain and figure it out at the same time. And with a little bit of time to myself, I got everything out, and wow, if I ever get this back in, I will be amazed at myself. There's just so many tiny little things, I mean, down to that. I mean, that's smaller than my fingernail. Worst case, I'll end up bringing it to a professional, and they can probably figure out how to put it back together. So I gotta order some parts, and then I'm hoping that new ring will come in. It is this one right here, as you can see there, so we will be replacing the first gear. Hopefully that will stop the grinding. Hopefully, that is. So I gotta wait for some things to come in, and while I'm waiting, I'm going to hopefully try and clean up the case and maybe try and organize this stuff a little bit better. And as you can see here, we got that top part off, and we were able to get it off without a press, which is fantastic. My neighbor used a much better, higher quality of the version of this puller that we got. He was able to help me out, and we were able to get it off. Thank you so much, Mr. Caleb. So now here is the first gear synchro ring, and I don't know how to tell whether it's worn or not, but I'm just gonna assume it is. since it's the only one that's grinding, and here is our brand new one. So that is going to slip back on. Then I'm going to put this entire piece in the freezer, and I'm going to heat this piece up, and hopefully I can slip it on back without a press. That's the hopes anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and try and do all that. Make sure I've got everything back in place correctly, and then we'll start putting everything back in the housing. As you can see here, I've got both of these shafts back in the transmission. They're just kind of sitting here for now. I've got to come back and put the 5th gear around the back in. I've gotten this 1 gear back in here. This is what turns the 5th gear, and the rest of these gears just slip onto the side. So I've got to finish up all these, and I'm making sure to use blue Loctite, just like the original. I got a new gasket so I can put this cover back on, as well as that piece that we had to pierce. This piece right here, as you can see, it's got a hole in it. I got a new one, so we can put that new one in, and then we can put this piece of the transmission back in the casing, and we'll be absolutely good to go to put the transmission back in Paxton. Alright, and I got the reverse gears and the 5th gear back in place, and it's time to go ahead and clean up the mating surfaces for the gasket to smoothly connect on, and then get this cover back on so we can put this whole chunk back in the transmission. I'm going to check over everything, make sure everything's good and tight and down to torque like it should be, and then I'll get this piece and the new gasket put on, as well as that new ring we were talking about, and then we can put this back in the transmission. And I know I grazed over a lot of this. I didn't really show a ton or really tell you how to do much of anything, but if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. I think I could probably try and help you out. At least I can point you in the right direction. So if you have any questions on this, I would be happy to assist. So let me get the entire gearbox back together and we'll get it re-put into the transmission. The transmission is finished and it is time to put it back into the car. Let's do it. And the new transmission is now installed, and I've gotten everything back hooked up to the car, as well as the shifting and everything up in the front goes. I've taken the car for a couple test drives and everything is finally working correctly. No more grinding in first gear or any of the other gears. Right at first I was kind of nervous because it was grinding and not allowing me to go into 4th gear, but I was able to go from 3rd to 5th, so it wasn't a huge problem. But after messing with some of the linkage that goes into the transmission, everything seems fixed now, and it is not grinding in any gears, and it is going in and out perfectly. So this was a very interesting, stressful project, but as you can see now, everything is back together. If you have any questions on how to do this yourself, leave them down in the comments below. And if you could, please subscribe. That would mean so much to me. These videos are not cheap to make, and this whole project's been pretty expensive. Be looking forward to upcoming videos because there is more coming. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Later.